we got that set. And we are live on there. Go live. All right. We are live on everything. Are you able to see the comments?
Yep.
Sweet. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Deal Flow Live, where myself, Brody Vinson, and Ryan Santo, that you see over here, are going to be breaking down some business listing deals. Hopefully you can see here the listings that we're looking at. Today, we chose another listing site. We're going to be looking at something called bizquest.com. Off the bat, one thing I really like about this one is that it actually, when you do a search, it sorts them. It sorts the businesses by just straight up businesses, franchises, asset sales, startup businesses, and real estate. So you can kind of get an idea of what it is you're actually looking for. So we're going to keep it on businesses for now. And we decided to hone in on a particular category today, which is moving, storage, and delivery businesses, logistics, trucking, that kind of thing. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this type of company?
I do always enjoy a good storage company. I think those are really straightforward and streamlined businesses that are very hard to come by for a reason. You know, there's a lot of firms buying up them first and foremost. But I don't know if anybody out there has a storage unit. You may have seen it gotten rebranded 2 or 3 times. I know my local one has gone through 2 different name changes. And that's because people keep buying up the competition. They buy out each other because it's such a good business model. I mean, the upkeep is fairly straightforward. It's minimal to an extent. I mean, in relation to what you're doing. So I went, there was where I was trying to buy one. I think I made probably close to 300 calls. And I maybe got 30 calls back, and it was all no, or, you know, just any sort of like, we're not selling, or, you know, we already have something. So there's a reason they're hard to buy. They're really, really difficult. And trucking lines are cool. I love the idea of having a trucking company and stuff. There's a lot of good ones out there to buy. And there's also, you know, if you see somebody advertising, hey, for X amount of money, you can get a truck that that they'll handle and you'll just make money passively, I would advise against those. That's less business ownership and more trusting a stranger. And I just don't think you should be doing that with those types of investments.
I would agree with that. But for something established like this, could be a pretty good business to own. And we decided to do something interesting today and actually sort them. Another cool thing I like about BizQuest, this is the case with most of the listing sites, but you can sort them in terms of the cash flow. So I actually sorted them from most cash flow available to least. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be looking at some expensive businesses today, but ones that are making a lot of money. These are the exciting ones. So let's skip this FedEx route. Like Ryan was saying before we got on the live, that's kind of it's kind of its own thing. They have their own kind of method for that, but we usually like to look at more private type companies.
Yeah, FedEx routes, Amazon routes, shipping routes. There's a lot of people selling those and a lot of those out there. I think that's a whole episode in of itself, because the people who did that well and established those, they're crazy good at supply chain management. So very interesting though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be a really good one to own. So we might take a whole episode on that, like you said. Now, this one is an aggregate hauling company. So what that means most likely is that it's compiled of a few different types of hauling. Let's take a little bit of a look at the description here. So looks like they've got a well-established brand. They've been going since 2013. That kind of hits our checkbox that we like to look at. We like to see a business that's 10 years or more old, because we know that it's made it through some market cycles and really has done well for itself. Another thing is that it has 24 employees. So there's a lot already established in this business. Always good to see. It looks like they've got an established location that's being leased. We personally don't really like the idea for ourselves of what we're looking for. We don't really like the idea of buying real estate. It can complicate a transaction, and it's just a little bit complex to deal with. So not necessarily one of the things we're looking for. So I like seeing that it's leased. And one thing that we always like to look at, no matter what business it is we're analyzing, is the reason for selling. So you can see the reason for selling right here. I'll zoom in for those watching on TikTok. The reason for selling here is retirement. So that's usually a really big green flag for what we're looking for. We like to see that the reason for selling is retirement, because that just means they've been running the business for a while, they've done a good job, and they're just wanting to move on to the next thing.
I think probably collectively we've looked at almost 5 or 6 thousand postings across different sites and Facebook pages and whatnot. The number one reason for people to sell is retirement. So, if somebody, there are variations of that, like we showed last time with somebody just having some, personal issues, some health issues. So, most of the time they're going to be retiring, and that's really a good probing question of, when you talk to this person, if you're interested, getting the story of the business, how they got to that point, and what they're, maybe saying, are you moving on to the next thing? Because sometimes retirement for people is going into a different business, or they're folks. I've seen one that says retirement, comma, focusing on my main business. So that could be somebody's side business. They're just retiring from it.
In the case of this one, I wouldn't be surprised if this is their main business, though. This is a very well-established one, which we like to see. That if you look at the financials here, they're actually doing almost $36 million in sales every year, which is pretty huge. Now, I don't know off the top of my head what the margins for a hauling company like this are usually supposed to be, but obviously the cash flow, you can see the margins aren't too fantastic, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's typical for something like this. Let's take a look.
Well, I would say that when we're looking at this, then if we just kind of give a I don't know, just a light mental math on it, you're doing vehicle upkeep, you have probably your insurance is pretty high because you're hauling a lot of injury prone stuff. You're probably even hauling some stuff that could hurt the people doing it. I'm going to say maybe on this one, oh, that's really cool. Maybe they're just paying their people a lot, keeping them, well in and making sure their lives are good. So
labor is going to be the biggest cost there, I'm sure.
But 24 people, and that makes me positive that maybe they treat their people really well. And that's a business that I would feel good stepping into as well. I always like to see that.
True. One thing I would be a little bit worried about with those margins, though, is just a little bit of like a fluctuation could happen, and it could really throw you off. So I would want to see a good history of the last. Honestly, I would probably want to see more history than the last 3 years on this one.
Oh, yeah.
Just to see how it's gone through on the market conditions.
I'd like to see about 5 years on this.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone in the chat has a business or a type of business they want us to look at, just let us know and we can pull something up for you guys. If anybody has something in particular.
In the chat?
Yeah, we got Devin just kind of.
I know why Devin's in here. I was hoping he would join. He is looking for a solar business.
Oh yeah,
actually,
well, let's help Devin out. Let's go pull up.
Does he have any particular questions?
Nope. He just said it was cool.
Nice.
So, I mean, he's on.
So
in my book.
Write in with any questions you guys have. If you're here because you're looking for a particular business, or maybe you have a business already and you just want to get a good idea of what it might be worth, how it's valued, feel free to write in wherever you're tuning in from with any questions, just so that we can kind of see what the people want to know and we're happy to answer them. So back to this one though. One thing we like to see is just good brand equity for a business that's old like this. So known for professionalism, reliability, honesty, and customer service. I mean, anyone can say that, but if we were to check out this business and actually really get that sense and maybe hear that from some of their customers or something like that, those would be things that would be really big green flags as well. Just things that tell us that it's got some longevity in the industry and that the current customers and clients that are dealing with it will probably want to continue dealing with it.
What I mean, I don't know if we're going back to it, but the other thing that we both really enjoy is, and this is nothing against the consumer market. There's a lot of meat on the bone in consumers because number one, consumers average, everybody else. That's a huge market to think. But the fact that their customers are predominantly businesses, it's corporate, airports, hospitals, those are big, meaty clients that are going to have contracts that could be a year, 2 years, 5 years. So you're coming in with a good book already, and that's really valuable.
Yeah, exactly. anytime you're dealing with some kind of service business, like service-based business, if you see that it is mostly commercial clients, that's one of the biggest green flags it could have, because like Ryan said, there's more reliability in those big contracts, and I'd say it's more likely they're going to stick around as well, and you're not going to be dealing with a lot of issues per se.
And it's always easier to scale down than scale up. So if you're going to want, as if you buy this and you want to get into like, just the dump removal space, which is fairly large and there's a lot of people in it, but there's always room for more. Everybody's got junk. You can do that much easier than trying to go from residential junk to going to a hospital and be like, let me take your stuff. Because this fleet is very expensive. Those dump trucks are, maintenance, and that's probably a big part of where that gross revenue goes to maintain their fleet.
It's a great point, and a couple things to point out here. One, that we should get to talking about the asking price. It's pretty high, but for a business this large, it doesn't look out of line. It also includes $2 million of essentially inventory, so most likely the trucks that they own. Let's do some quick math on this. So off the top of my head, or off the top of my calculator rather, 2742. Yeah, it'll be over a 4 but under a 5.
I'm gonna say 4.7.
So asking price of $10.9 million. So oops, did that opposite. So 10.9 over 2742. So this is about actually lower than it looked, than we thought. So this is just under a 4x multiple. This is actually a really good deal. As soon as you start crossing the threshold of $1 million in cash flow per year, the multiple game starts to change a little bit, and you're going to see pretty much always over a 3, but you could see over a 4. You could even see over a 5 at this level, especially for something fairly straightforward like this, and something that includes this much in inventory, not inventory, but in equipment. This actually looks like a really good deal. Now, one thing that might be partially responsible for that is it looks to me like they are expecting most of that in cash at close. You can see right here, they are open to seller financing, and they've actually gone ahead and listed what exactly they're open to. But of the 10.9 million purchase price, they're only willing to finance 10% of that.
That's not surprising.
It's not surprising at this level, but that does make it a lot more difficult to purchase for the everyday person. So this might be one that they're targeting more of an established trucking company to acquire this.
This is a great buy for somebody in the space or who is looking. I think if you have somebody who's in construction or who owns it, this is definitely more of a B2B sale. I mean, if you're a consumer and you have assets that you can leverage to get the SBA loan to establish this, it seems like with that much money, he's got processes, operators, like, essentially he's offering a 10% discount with the seller financing, which is, is what it is. But I think it's mostly to avoid tire kickers and people who are like, trying to really get one over. So this is a hot listing. It's seller financing. Will it go quickly? I hope so. I think this is probably really good, but if it's around longer, maybe his broker would suggest that he do a bit more seller financing to sweeten the pot.
Yeah. And one thing to think about if you are a personal buyer thinking about going the SBA route, from my understanding, at least as of recently, they will only fund up to $5 million in purchase price. So this is one that if the seller financing terms did not change, this is one you actually wouldn't be able to quite acquire with SBA financing.
I feel like there's another SBA type that you can. I'll have to look into it because I feel like I definitely know that you're right. But for some reason I'm thinking there's something else. So maybe it's not SBA. Maybe I'm thinking about something else. I'll have to come back and with
there's
that.
2 different types, but one is more real estate focused. You might be thinking
that's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, that's why they give you so much leeway.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do maybe do a solar panel one for Devin if you.
Yeah, let's see if we can find
something
solar. Yeah. Florida solar businesses.
Yeah,
and I know he's been looking at a few the last week or two.
I mean, it's a good industry. The sun's not going anywhere for now.
Exactly. It's a hot business. They're not usually that easy to find, surprisingly. This could be interesting.
Exceptional.
It looks to me like it could be a franchise, though. What do you think? One thing,
That
I think
picture
I
is too
pointed this out in the
nice.
last episode. Yeah, picture looks too nice. I mean, they use stock photo most of the time on these websites anyway. But one thing I pointed out in the last episode that I'll run into the ground again and again, if you're not looking for a franchise, a lot of times it's easy to kind of skip and like find them easily because they might list very, very clean round numbers like this. But we'll take a look at it anyway.
Which is not a deal killer. Sometimes it's just like they're kind of like making the, sometimes it's like 2.56, sometimes it's not the worst thing. It's just like, oh, this is appealing and it's not that far off. So don't let that scare you away from talking to somebody about what they're looking at. Already we're under 10 years.
And yeah, and upon further look, it's obviously not a franchise. This one looks really good. It's just under 10 years, but it's still pretty well established. Solar hasn't been hot for that long. 10 employees, leased space, checking a lot of our boxes. Fairly expensive rent here, but it is doing a lot of cash flow per year. So not too bad there. Includes a little bit of not inventory. I keep saying inventory. It includes a little bit of equipment here. One thing I would want to know with this one is, from my understanding, and Devin would back this up if he was here, there's really kind of two main types of solar companies. There's ones where they do more of the actual sales and they're going out, maybe canvassing, selling the actual installation. And then a lot of times there will be an installation company. And it's possible that the two could be together, but a lot of times there's one handling each part. So if you were looking for a solar company to buy, you would want to know which one you're looking for, probably which one you feel like you have more experience in, and then you would want to figure out which one this one is. And it looks like it's a solar installation business, so that answers our question there.
That to me is the better of the two options, just because installation means repairs, it means maintenance. There's a whole lot more, and you're not stuck. I mean, if you're selling it, how many people can you really knock? How many doors are there to knock on, essentially, and how many opportunities are there? And if the standardization of the panel is something that other people have, you can market yourself to other people who are like, oh, I need a second or third. I need 3 more panels. Okay, we got you. So a lot more flexibility with an installation than a sales business,
especially if they're tied into some really good sales teams. That's one thing that I would want to know if I was getting into this, is what kind of companies are they partnered with, and how does that work? But let's go back to some of the numbers here. This is number one, a fantastic deal. Just over a 2x multiple. It's doing 1.2 million in cash flow, or seller's discretionary earnings, and they're only asking 2.5 million. And the margins, to double that, the margins are almost 50%. They're very near 50%. I would want to know what's the catch. Like, why is it listed so low?
I mean,
we go down here,
retirement. Everybody's retiring.
All employees want to stay on. That's a major thing. That's always going to be a question. Okay. Buyer would have to acquire their own financing. So that
no seller financing. That's
probably the catch that we were looking for here, because obviously to come up with $2.5 million, you're going to have to go and figure it out.
You're getting hard money loans, or you're doing the SBA route, or a smaller bank loaning you the money based on whatever. So that is definitely part of the, the quote catch. I mean, clearly this person is done with business. They just would like to be paid and be out. So that's fine.
$2.5 million is a great little chunk to retire on too.
Yeah. Not, assuming inflation stays the way it is, that does pretty well if everything moves the way it looks like.
And assuming they've got some money saved up. I mean, if they've been doing 1.2 million in cash flow for any sustained amount of time. They've probably got a decent amount of money saved up, I would hope, at least.
Yeah, I always like to imagine in my head, because I like to make stories about these people I've never met, that this is all grandkid money or tour, like go around the world cruising money. So I always like to think of like these happy little scenarios that they're getting paid out to do. I mean, I'd still always say, you know, make sure you really comb through those finances. You know, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck, but you know, a platypus looks like a duck sometimes.
And one thing here, we talked about the very round numbers before.
Yeah.
Not like Ryan said, not necessarily a red flag, but
No.
I would want to ask some questions about that, and I would want to make sure that their finances are actually well organized.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to want to see, and this is the case for any business you're looking at, right? You're going to want to see the balance sheet, the income statement, and a statement of cash flows if possible, especially for a business this size. That's something they should absolutely have. And ultimately, that having all three of those is what's going to help you get the full picture of what's going on. And if they're putting round numbers like this, that might mean they don't have them that updated, or it might just mean that whoever was listing it was feeling lazy. You never know until you ask.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, this is pretty cool. I think they actually I think they've listed somewhere that actually are in due diligence with this one.
Yeah. So I thought I saw that too. I'm not seeing it anymore. That might have been a different one that we had pulled up before.
Either way, though, if you're interested in solar, this is probably a good one for you to check out and reach out if the funding makes sense to you. Because
yeah, Devin, if you're still watching, you should look at this one.
Yeah, assuming, I mean, you know, big ask, but there's ways to kind of figure that out, I'm sure. So somebody would maybe partner with some people, something, because if this is what it is, then that's a really good deal.
It is. Yeah. And again, going back to the SBA route that we talked about earlier, you can get SBA funding up to 5 million usually. So for a 2.5 million purchase price, you're only cracking into half of that.
Yeah.
So pretty awesome. You could, if you have experience in solar and have good credit and the proper checks and balances to go get an SBA loan, this is something you could take over fairly easily for a really great multiple. I think it'd be interesting actually to take a look at what that might look like. So let's imagine for a second that you're someone who's been working for a solar company for a while, and you decided you wanted to go, you've saved up some money, maybe enough for a down payment here, maybe a pretty significant amount. Maybe you've been working in it for like 10 years and you've saved up like a nice big chunk. You've saved up, let's say 10% of this, you've saved up $250,000 and you want to acquire your own business and take this over. So if you've got that $250,000 to put down for the 10%, usually that'll allow you to finance the rest of the 90% with SBA financing. So now, it did say in here that the buyer would have to acquire their own financing. I would still want to ask if they were open to some form of seller financing. It could be that they would finance that remaining 10% purchase price somehow to you, and you might be able to work out something there. But let's imagine you're financing the 90%. So $2.5 million times 0.9, you're going to be financing $2.25 million. Typically, that's going to be over 10 years. So divided by 10, that's going to be about $225,000 a year that you owe on your loan.
Not including percentage rates, you know, the percentage of interest that you're accruing. So this is more of a rough number. Don't forget that.
Rough number. And so let's round it up to maybe, is it 10, 11% right now?
Let's say 11%.
Let's
always go high.
So this is a monthly price. Let's say times 1.11. So your monthly payment on that loan is probably going to look something like just under $21,000. Now let's take a look at what you'd actually be making per year though. So remember that number, $21,000 a month is about what you're going to owe. If everything stayed relatively similar and you acquired this $1.2 million in cash flow, assuming you were keeping everything the same, if you weren't shaking things up much, that 1.2 million in cash flow per year is probably going to bring you about $100,000 a month. So if your payment on the loan is $21,000 a month, then you could potentially be profiting $79,000 a month if you were able to take over this company.
With all things being what they are, that's kind of incredible. Now,
That is incredible.
I always say, you know, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't, you know, factor into this. So we don't know what their emergency fund is like and if this business has one. If it doesn't have an emergency fund, you'll definitely want to take about maybe, I'd say enough to, over the course of time there, you want to have an emergency fund that's at minimum 6 months of your business operation cost to have on the side. So if you come in and they, you know, the saving, there's no real savings for this business essentially. You definitely want to take away that 79. You maybe want to put 10K of that into a separate account to make sure that if something happens, God forbid, your business can operate a few more months in advance. And then I always say we take some of that and we say, okay, 79K a month. All right, we'll put 10K into a complete revamp of the systems, 5K into marketing. You know, you're really going to be spending a lot more that first, those first 6 to 12 months, at least in our style of like really making sure that we're spending in the business to grow it and then saying, okay, do I need an operator there? Because this person also doesn't really list how active they are in the business.
Yeah, that's a really big point there. And I like that you mentioned that. Usually we like to see some kind of explanation about whether the business is owner absentee, which means it's being run without them, or another way they describe it a lot of times is turnkey. It means that the business can be run very simply without the owner having to take much responsibility. I would definitely want to know more about that. And with how good those margins are, I wouldn't be surprised if the owner is doing some things. But at the same time, I know there's great money in solar. It could be that the margins are just there because it's set up well and it's running smooth and it's been around for a little while.
So yeah, there's a lot of questions here, but there's a lot of good stuff to be looked into. So if you're seriously considering solar and you can figure out a way to make the money work, definitely look into this one because this could be a really big opportunity, especially with a staff that's willing to stay on.
Yeah, and that is one of the biggest green flags I saw.
Hey, with 79K a month, you know, maybe everybody gets a raise when you start.
Yeah,
great way to get loyalty. You give everybody a pay bump. Hey, I'm the new owner. Here's a pay bump. I mean, that'll keep a lot of people around.
Give out some bonuses or something. You definitely have the leeway to do some things like that. One other thing I would want to know about this company is just what some of the contracts look like with the actual sales team, the teams that they operate with through other companies. I would just want to know what those relationships look like and whether they expect to continue dealing with the new owner too, because the cash flow really does all kind of hinge on that.
Yeah. And one other thing that we always talk about is when there's a large price, I'll ask the owner if he can cut, you know, if employees are able to come in on the deal with you, essentially. You know, you never want to give up more than maybe 5 to 10% to an employee just because you're buying the business because you kind of want to run it. So it doesn't make sense if somebody wants, you know, buy 55% or 50 even. But you'd be surprised that there's a lot of people out there who are like, I have 5% worth of this, or I have 2%. Well, 5% here, 2% there, 1% there. Yeah, you're losing equity, but at the same time, your purchase price just went down and you're still majority. So you're really coming out on top in that sense. So I would always explore that option of, are there any employees that would be interested in coming in even at a small percentage?
And if you don't have the massive chunk of $250,000 that you need to put down for this, which most people won't, then that could be an interesting route to getting that 10% that you need. If you maybe
keeping people in.
Yep, exactly. So a lot of creative ways you could approach it. That was a good one. Let's keep moving.
Good recommendation, Devin.
Let's do a couple more here. I'll go back a couple because this is going to mostly just have us in solar.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at this one. This one just popped up.
Business.
Adjusting business.
That title threw me off. Oh, they're an adjuster. Okay. For insurance, I'm assuming.
Let's skip this one because it's sale pending.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This could be interesting. Assisted living facility. What do you think?
Sure. I mean, I don't see a cash flow. Yeah.
Oh, We'll skip that one as well. No cash flow listed. You can't really analyze a deal without knowing what the cash flow is.
No. Maybe we go back to some the truckers.
Yeah, a lot of these are not listing details.
Very interesting.
It is. Florida service businesses for sale. Let's go. Here. How about this restoration business?
I was about
What
to
do you
say,
think?
immediately locked in on that one.
This looks like a good business. So this one is right off the top. We're at a little bit lower than a 3x multiple. And for something with cash flow just over 500,000, that's pretty standard actually. That's actually a pretty good deal as well, being just under 3x.
We use 3x as an industry kind of standard here. So we're like, it's above or below standard. 3x is kind of that threshold for us.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, certain points notwithstanding.
Yeah, and it varies per industry, obviously. But when you're talking about a business, a lot of times the size of the business itself is the biggest determinant there.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to acquire one and use some financing and have it at something around a 3 or under a 4, even down as low as almost 2, that really helps you with what you're trying to do with all the financing. So looks like this specializes in water damage and mold services.
Good for our area.
I don't see us getting rid of water anytime soon, which means mold will stick around as well. So this is a good, solid business that you can expect to stay around and not to have many problems with.
This really hits a lot of good marks. Highly trained and talented leadership team. So they have a trained staff and leadership. They list the reputation, large job capacity. I guess that maybe means they're more kind of more like that. Robust referral network. Great. They have referral programs already in stock. But even more important than that, pre-qualified by an SBA lender. So they've already gone through the process, which SBA is quite a arduous process, and they look for every reason to not give you a loan, not because they're trying to screw you, but because it's just simply a lot of money. And if people just kind of got it handed out, well, actually, we did see what happened during COVID. So the fact that they went through the trouble of getting pre-qualified by an SBA lender being on their end, they're all good to go for it. So you just need to come with your stuff. So I love that.
Yeah, exactly. And if they've done all that pre-qualification, there might be other little opportunities in there as well. If all of that due diligence has been done, I would maybe talk to that SBA lender and just say, hey, like maybe find some other potential angles that you could come in on and see what else is going on. Let's dive into this a little bit more. The valuation methodology is driven by the lender pre-qualification and industry standard multiple. I think that's it of SDE for businesses under 5 million. I think that's interesting. The owner will not consider M&A valuation methodologies for this business and will not participate in equality of earnings. That right there is definitely a big red flag to me.
That's concerning, but I would like to talk to the owner as to why. I don't know what's putting that. I mean, that's a very specific thing to be. I mean, that's a very important part of many of them. And I don't think we've really ever gone into quality of earnings, but we can. But I really would like to know why they're so averse to that, because that seems like they probably had a bad experience, or perhaps something in their due diligence and their valuation. They were like, told them to put the brakes on it, and they were like, you're fine, don't worry about it. So there's probably something that caused them to feel like that. So I'd like to know what before I ask why.
Yeah, likewise. And I mean, I would want to talk to the SBA lender that pre-qualified them as well, because it could be that they already did a quality of earnings report through the SBA. And I mean, I would probably trust the SBA if they said they did one.
I mean, at that point, yeah, if they're like, we did one, it's a government entity. So, it's not really much they're going to listen to if you bring in another party. So if they're the ones giving the money out, you got to kind of go with them. And they also don't want to give money to businesses they don't think are going to be successful.
Exactly, because then they don't get their interest.
But if somebody doesn't have that and it's not a Q, they're denying the QOV. Well, that's again, like, why are you so averse to that? It's never like what's wrong with you. It's just kind of like figuring out what scarred them to not do that.
And for background, we should talk a little bit about what a QOE is. A quality of earnings report is basically something you can do if you're looking at buying a business. It's a due diligence tactic where you can go in and you can actually have an independent third party, like an accounting firm or something like that, go in and make sure that whatever this company is reporting on their tax documents and on the financial statements that they're showing you, they'll make sure that those are coming from real earnings and that that money is actually real and is actually trading hands. Huh. We had someone on TikTok ask if we speak Russian. Do you speak Russian, Rob?
No, unfortunately not.
I don't speak Russian either.
It would be insulting for me to try, so I apologize.
It would also be insulting for me to try. I'm sorry. We'll have to learn a little bit of Russian before the next episode.
Or at least get like something where we can translate these like through like Google into Russian to make them more accessible.
Exactly.
We'll figure it out.
Now, let's look at one more. I will say the one thing I don't like about this one is there's just not, they really skimped on what information they could put. There's nothing about the reason for the sale or the motivation of the seller. Again, not a red flag, but
decades of service. Like there's a lot of green flags. There's some orange flags, but I would say this would be one to dig in. You'd have to really do some digging if you were interested and get the story, really kind of figure out this broker and get a feel for him.
It's interesting that it's facilitated by a broker that seems to specialize in restoration businesses.
Okay.
I think that means, we have our opinions about working with brokers. Obviously, it adds a layer of complication to who has to get paid. Not that they're not good, that brokers are great and they add a massive layer of professionalism to the deal. So on that subject, someone who specializes in restoration companies will probably be able to answer a lot of your questions effectively. And really talk at a high level about this business.
Yeah, they have to get this business sold. So if they have a client who's being unreasonable or making outrageous claims and it's not moving, the broker is going to be the one who goes back to them and says, "Hey, look, I really think you got to like work with this person." So it's kind of like a realtor. If you're working with them, you can do deals without them, but for as many successes, there are also the chance of getting completely washed out on a deal. So we like brokers. If you're a broker and you want us to look at some of the listings you have posted for your clients, let us know. Happy to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, if you're listening and you are an existing business owner, whether you're an existing business owner who's thinking about selling at some point in the near or far future, and you're wanting to understand how this stuff all works, or you're someone who is thinking about buying a business, feel free to shoot us some questions. Find us on social media, wherever you're tuning in, and just shoot us some questions either now or later, and we're happy to answer them.
Oh, this was the one I was doing at like 11:30 2 nights ago.
This one?
Yeah.
Good. This is the one I wanted to look at. I like the look of this one.
I like this a lot, actually.
Yeah, I like the look of this one too. Off the bat, good multiple, not like an outstanding or like mind-blowing multiple, but it is under a 3x multiple. We love to see that. That's, like we said, kind of the benchmark.
But I also look at the business. It's pest control and lawn fertilization. Like that's not, not terribly complicated. There's some licenses that we're paying for essentially. They did work, they worked hard. So I think, they're asking under their gross, which is always a nice, something that's kind of considerate when they're not trying to base it off the gross revenue.
And there's 85,000 in equipment included, and they're not giving it any kind of big.
The numbers are fairly exact, 238,383, whatever it is.
Absentee owner. That's fantastic. That means
you can add money onto your price just because you're absentee. You can throw on more to what you want for that alone. Especially because if I recall correctly, it's also a home-based business, which again is an add-in to your price.
Looks like there is rent.
Probably a storage facility or some sort of location where equipment's held.
That's probably right for $1,500 a month.
Yeah, it's nothing.
That's not too bad. Yeah, 6 employees, so it's pretty well established. Yeah, it is running pretty lean. Honestly, I like the looks of the margins. Again, the margins look like roughly a little more than 25%. So we like to see.
There's a lot of room. Yeah, you can do a lot with that. There's probably a lot of they're probably not doing much marketing. I mean, let's read into it a bit. I don't remember everything, but this made me very excited when I watched it. Less than 5 hours a week on the business. So to me, that says they got it. They dialed it in. It's running, and they're just kind of tired of doing. They're just kind of like done. They made their money. They want to move on. So that says to me a lot of opportunities in marketing, in expanding business, moving into different territories. This is also one that if you have a lawn care business and you're just doing like, cutting and maintaining, this guy you need licenses for this sort of thing. You buy this and add it into your thing. Well, that's a value add. So I'm excited about this one. Love this.
Here's one thing I love to see as well: 1,000 customers. My general rule,
retention of 85%.
I had highlighted both of them. Yeah, 85% retention is incredible. 1,000 customers is amazing, because if you think about that, 1,000 customers, if you lose one, you're losing 0.001. You're losing 0.1% of your clientele.
Yeah.
And my usual rule is if you could lose one customer, and obviously we don't know what the revenue breakdown per customer is, but usually if you could lose one customer and lose 15% of your revenue or more, that usually is a big red flag, and that's a kind of a scary business to own because there's a lot of risk. This comes nowhere near that. They could probably lose 1/10 of their customers and still be doing all right.
Look at that. Look at the man, the myth, the legends, Mr. Salesperson, generating 10 to 12 new customers a week over the past 18 months. Wow.
Hands-on manager who runs the daily operations.
Everybody getting a raise.
Because a lot of people will say absentee owner, and that might be a little bit of a farce. I like seeing they actually genuinely have a dedicated operator. Again, less than 5 hours per week, 5 full-time employees, 3 experienced technicians, the salesperson, like Ryan said. I mean, that's incredible. That salesperson is probably just making bank.
They've earned it. Damn.
Established in 2016, so it doesn't hit our 10-year benchmark, but it's still pretty well established. Anything over 5
Which is weird
solid.
Because they're saying it was established in 2009, so it's a little bit of a discretion. Weird.
That is odd. Yeah, I would want to know what's going on there. Yeah. Maybe a typo. Maybe something happened there.
I mean, those are definitely 1 and 6 and 9 are definitely far apart. But yeah, that's where I'm looking at these numbers, looking at the size, and when you're small is relative in this industry. So like 800,000, anything under $1 million is going to be pretty small as by our standards. That's not a bad thing. It's very accessible actually if you're getting started.
Now this is interesting. I would want to dig in on this reason for selling a good bit and just ask some clarifying questions.
Well, if you're getting 10 to 12 a week, you have to start being active again.
Right. And that's what it says. It sounds to me, and if you're somehow watching this, sorry. To me, it sounds like the operator that they have is just not good enough.
You mean the guy who's the manager?
Yeah.
I feel like, and maybe, we'll cut, if this is your business, first of all, great job. Great job to everybody whose businesses we looked at. I think probably what's happening is this sales guy, he's the guy. He is him.
He's literally him.
He is him, yeah. I think this poor guy who's running the daily operations is doing probably the best that he can, but just is unable to. And with an absentee owner, is he really going to want to go and find a manager, get another guy trained, worry about it? No, he's absentee. He's done. It's like,
exactly.
I'm making my money. So this would benefit from people who really want to get into business and who want to be there. Maybe you buy it and you're saying, hey, manager, train me to understand this business inside and out. I'll manage it with you to start. And then you get another guy. You hire more people. I mean, this to me seems like a fantastic opportunity.
Or maybe you figure out what that manager, that the operator's strengths are and where he's struggling, because clearly he's struggling if some of the stress is going on to the owner and they're wanting to be absentee, and obviously some of the growth and the stresses behind that are moving up to them and they shouldn't be. So I would want to figure out where's that stress coming from, what areas of the business is is it kind of outgrowing this manager, and where are they struggling? And maybe you could put them in a position where they're really in their strengths. Maybe managing the salesperson is really their strength and they're having to take on too much other stuff. I would want to figure out what their strengths are and really push them into that, and then maybe fill some of the weakness gap with someone else.
I agree with you completely. I think looking at this is a personnel issue, and not in the sense of like we need to gut the people, they're terrible, they're not doing their jobs. I think it's like, all right, what's the problems, what are you facing in a day, and how can we help you as the new owners, which is really how you get people to stick around when you take something over. That collaborative environment where you're like, I know you're having trouble right now, so you tell me what you need to do and I will oh, we going on a field trip?
So wanted to pull this up too. You won't see this if you're not looking, or it's not going to share on the screen, but just to kind of fill you in, I actually wasn't familiar with where Pasco County is. It's kind of in the no man's land in between Tampa and Orlando. And so
Rapidly developing
though. And so this is a business where it's probably growing partially because of that rapid development, but they also probably don't have many competitors that are as established as them. So that's probably a really good thing for them. Honestly,
Yeah.
this is a business that has me very intrigued.
Yeah, I think we might reach out to him after this.
Yeah.
And hey, if you're watching, go reach out to him too if you really think you can. You really think this is for you, man. I think everybody who owns a business should get their fair cut, and the best, people who are really going to take it to the next level should do it. So, also something to consider. There's a lot of businesses out there. I found out today there's over 200 something thousand realtors in Florida. I think that's correct. Yeah, because there's 1.5 something realtors in the country, and 200,000 plus are in Florida alone, and they're doing well. So to that point, there's a lot of business out there. A lot of people who run. You'll see landscaping, you'll see pest control, you'll see pool things. Just because there's a lot of them going up for sale doesn't mean that they're bad businesses or that there are too many people. There's always going to be lawns, always going to be pools. It just means you get to put your own spin on it and, do something with something that they couldn't sell it if it wasn't doing well. And your due diligence will let you know whether that's true or not. But don't be afraid just because you're like, oh, I see like 40 or 50 ones already in the area. There's definitely not 40 or 50 lawns and pools. So
you never know what the situation is, to Ryan's point of why someone's selling. And there are plenty, like, to agree with you again, there are plenty of businesses that are selling that are not for bad reasons. They're not bad businesses. This could be someone who started the business, maybe ran it the first 5 years themselves, and then maybe his or her significant other was like, you're spending way too much time on this thing. You got to get a manager in place. They got a manager in place. Now is outgrowing the manager a little bit. And they're just like, no, you got to get out of there.
With
you
6
never know.
People, it sounds like people have the owner's phone number. They're probably being like, hey boss, I can't, hey boss, this and that. And he's just like, or he or she is like, that's enough. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, and it could be that they started and they were just so used to having that close connection with the owner. Now maybe it's outgrowing the manager. It's that stress is just creeping up to him, and you never know what the situation is. I would want to just get in and ask some questions and figure out what it is. Now, one thing we don't know here is whether they're open to any financing. So that's a little bit tough. You would want to figure that out. But again, under $1 million asking price, that is well within the bounds to get SBA financing on this. And if you were able to find an investor for 63,000 of that, for that 10% down, not outside of the realm of possibility. I mean, there are vehicles that people go and buy that cost well more than that. So totally doable, totally feasible, especially if you just had someone that was looking to make a good return. Their 10% equity would return, if you were paying them exactly on time, let's say you were paying them over 5 years on that 63,000.
Yeah, we're even cutting it in half. You're paying this off in 5 now.
Yep. They would get 12,600 per year. Let's say they financed it with 10%, like they gave it to you for 10%. Oops. Let me clear that. 63,000 divided by, nope. 63,000
You want 10%.
divided by 5. So that's how much they would be owed per year. Then if it was 10% per year, so they're going to be owed just under $14,000 a year, and your cash flow is
I think, well, you said you're doing
238,000.
asking price. I think it's 138,000 a year over 5 years.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
Because we're shorting the zeros just to stop hammering in zeros. So yeah, it'd be
so I was saying this is if someone were to fund the 10% that you need down for the SBA loan.
Okay,
this is what you would be paying them per year. So then if the rest was through SBA, remember that 14,000 number. If the 90% of the 630 was through SBA, also at 11%, you'd owe that much, and over 10 years, you'd owe about 62,937. You add that 14,000 that you owe your investor, they're making a good 10% return, and you are still making well over $100,000 in cash flow.
And that's as is
with a rapidly growing business.
Yeah. So you're going to have to, maybe you're making maybe you're hitting that 100K a year initially because you're taking all that extra capital isn't going there. And you're like, let me hire another person, get this, get that. So there's a lot of meat on the bone here. I think this guy did a great job scaling to where it is. And assuming everything is as it seems, fantastic opportunity.
Yeah. And maybe you can live off of $60,000 and you reinvest about half of that leftover.
You take a quarterly bonus. You decide, okay, maybe I'll take if we hit a quarterly milestone, I'll do bonuses for everybody, including myself.
Yeah, this is one I like. I'm glad we ended on this one.
Yeah, this is exciting.
So this has been Deal Flow Live. If you've been tuning in and you are looking to buy a business, sell a business, or you're just a business owner that wants to understand the M&A landscape a little bit more, we'll be doing this every week on Tuesday nights. I hope that you got some value out of this. Find us in the comments whenever you're tuning in, and also send us messages wherever you see us. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and a bunch of other places. Ryan's on LinkedIn, and I'm at Brody Vincent, and you're at
Ryan Santo.
And hit our lines if you got questions or you just want to talk about this stuff, because we love talking about it. Thanks for tuning in.